C/CD and DevOps, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, Jenkins. 1. How do you set up a C/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps? Answer. To set up a C/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps, create a project in Azure DevOps. Set up a Git repository, Azure Repos or GitHub. Define a YAML pipeline or use the classic UI-based pipeline. Add build steps such as compiling code, running tests, and packaging. Integrate SonarQube for code quality checks. Set up release pipelines to deploy to Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS, Azure VMs, or other cloud services. Implement approvals and gates for quality control before deployment. Monitor pipeline execution using logs and dashboards. 2. How do you integrate SonarQube into a C/CD pipeline? Answer. To integrate SonarQube into a C/CD pipeline, install the SonarQube plugin in Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, or Jenkins. Set up a SonarQube server and generate an authentication token. Define a SonarQube scan step in the pipeline. Azure DevOps. Use the SonarQube Prepare, SonarQube Analyze, and SonarQube Publish tasks. GitHub Actions. Use the SonarQube Scanner GitHub action. Jenkins. Use the SonarQube Scanner for Jenkins plugin and configure analysis in the Jenkins file. Ensure that SonarQube runs before the build succeeds to enforce code quality standards. Azure Cloud Infrastructure. 3. How do you optimize cloud infrastructure on Azure for scalability and cost efficiency? Answer. Use auto-scaling. Configure AKS and virtual machine scale sets, VMSS, for auto-scaling. Optimize database performance. Use Azure Database for PostgreSQL/MySQL performance tiers and tuning. Implement load balancers. Use Application Gateway or Azure Load Balancer for traffic distribution. Use reserved instances. For cost savings, purchase Azure Reserved VM instances instead of pay-as-you-go. Monitor resources. Use Azure Monitor and Azure Cost Management to optimize resource usage. Enable Spot instances. Use Azure Spot VMs for non-critical workloads to reduce costs. 4. How do you troubleshoot a failing Azure Kubernetes service, AKS deployment? Answer. Check pod status. Run kubectl get pods in namespace to check for errors. Inspect logs. Use kubectl logs pod name in namespace for detailed error messages. Describe pods. Run kubectl describe pod name to check for resource limits or missing dependencies. Verify network policies. Ensure Kubernetes network policies allow traffic to the application. Check Azure Load Balancer. Use kubectl get SVC to ensure the service is exposing the correct ports. Use Azure Monitor and Logs. Check application insights and log analytics for deeper insights. Incident management and monitoring. 5. How do you monitor and maintain high availability in a cloud environment? Answer. Use Prometheus and Grafana for monitoring AKS and infrastructure metrics. Enable Azure Monitor and Log Analytics for real-time insights. Set up alerts using Azure Alerts or Datadog for proactive issue detection. Use auto-scaling to adjust compute resources dynamically. Perform regular health checks using Kubernetes liveness and readiness probes. Implement disaster recovery, DR, with Azure Site Recovery and Backups. 6. What steps do you take to troubleshoot a C/CD pipeline failure? Answer. Review pipeline logs. Check logs for error messages. Check version control commits. Identify recent code changes. Validate secrets and environment variables. Ensure credentials are correct. Verify dependencies. Check package versions and dependencies. Rerun the pipeline with debug mode. Enable verbose logging to capture additional details. Roll back changes if needed. Use version control to revert to a previous working state. Linux administration. 7. How do you secure a Linux server? Answer. Apply security updates. Regularly patch the OS using apt update and apt upgrade or yum update. Use SSH hardening. Disable root login, change the default SSH port, and enable key-based authentication. Configure a firewall. Use UFO or IPtables to restrict access. Enable intrusion detection. Use tools like fail2ban and SE Linux/App Armor. Monitor logs. Use journal, syslog, and SIEM tools like Splunk or ELK Stack. 8. How do you automate Linux patching in an enterprise environment? Answer. Use Ansible or Chef to automate patch management. Schedule automatic updates with cron jobs or systemd timers. Leverage Azure Update Management to schedule and apply patches in a controlled manner. Monitor patch compliance using tools like Microsoft Defender for Cloud.